I'm Varian Brandon, and this is episode 6? I think it's 6 of the Stranded Knitting Discussion. This is actually, let's see, one introduction and 5th, so it's 6. Sorry, again, why did I start with an introduction? I don't know. Anyway, this episode is talking about knitting in the round. And, you know, some of you might say, why do you have to bother knitting in the round? I mean, if you've learned how to knit flat, why have to go learn a whole other sort of technique on knitting in the round? And that's the whole garment, knitting in the round. And it's because when you're doing charts, it's a lot easier to have the front side, the right side of your garment facing you, so that you're reading the chart, you're reading, your work is facing you at all times. You're not having to drag floats, strands in front of you, in front of your patterning. Whereas if you have got the right side facing you, your floats go around the back. That's to you. If I was doing it to myself, I'd say the floats would go around the back, and they don't get in the way of reading your pattern. I mean, this particular coat behind me, this is Branch and Vine, doing this flat would be a little difficult, a little interesting. But that's why you want to knit in the round. And there are various ways of doing that. And it's a construction thing. It's construction. It's a technique on how you knit, especially small circumferences is where it gets kind of ishy. Or gets kind of interesting. I'll say interesting. If you've got a coat like this, a sweater of any kind, the main part of a hat, you can get a needle that's long enough to put all your stitches on there. That's not an issue. The issue is when you get to, say, a circumference that's like, oops, where'd that come from? That's like this, where you'd have to get a needle that's really teeny tiny to make this circumference here. This is a demonstration piece for a class I was teaching, but it's something that you could definitely see as a mitt or as the top of a sock or the foot of a sock. So if you knit socks, you know what I'm talking about. You need something that you can do small circumferences on. And there's several ways of accomplishing that. One is to get a needle that's small enough to go around here. Well, once you get something to go around that size, and I also mean when you're closing up the top of a hat, when anytime you would need it, the top of a sleeve, as I said, mittens, hello, top of a sock, you're going to need something that could be, 4 inches. Have a 4-inch diameter, 8-inch circumference, and getting a set of needles for that size, it could be difficult. And when you do, your needle points you're kind of crampy, kind of knitting. It's not fun. The other way is DPNs. DPNs stand for double pointed needles, and it is a way of dividing your work into either 3 or 4 needles. Onto 3 or 4 needles, and they're different lengths. I didn't bring mine over here, but they're different lengths. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And that's a mastering itself. Some people love working on DPNs. I love DPNs because it's easier. You don't have all of this flapping around, and you just go around and around in a circle that way. The trouble with DPNs is, and in some cases, any sort of thing where you're moving from either one part of a needle to another or from one needle to another in the form of DPNs, or this is 2 circs, and we'll talk about this in just a second, you have the possibility of losing sort of tension where you make that change. The other one we'll talk about, we do is magic loop. I'm not a big fan of magic loop, and don't scream at me. I'm just not a big fan of magic loop. Magic loop is where you have an extra long needle, and then you pull out a portion of it so it's like this, and you knit around until you get to that point, and then you can close it up and pull it out somewhere else. And so that you are, it's a way to make your extra long cable smaller. I don't particularly like it because I get issues where I pull it out. I mean, there's the stitches in there either ladder or they do something funky. And I've got a ways around it. I guess my number one reason for not liking magic loop is that I have so many needles that are 28, 24. Yes, let me show you a needle like that. Good. So many needles that are, just this size. I mean, they're not really long, and that way I don't have to buy any more needles, I guess. I don't know. I'm a double, what's it called, two circs. I understand it might be sort of a lost art. I don't know, but I use two circs. And this is the circumference. It's probably about 3.5 inches wide. I don't think it's quite a full 4. As I said, this was a demonstration thing. And you have that circle. You have half of the circle on, see, this has a red cable, and I think it's a Chiago of some sort. And then the other half is on this side. I think this one is a Knitter's Pride. And they're both the same size. And so all I would do is push this way, bring the other end of the red cable up, knit across there until I reach the end, neutral that out, turn it, pick up the black cable, get it ready to work, and come around and work it. It's kind of like, if you didn't knit it with DPNs, it's kind of like that. In this case, you're only using 2 needles, and you're using the other end of the needle as your free needle. Can I say needle one more time? Is your free working needle at like a DPN. There are, I would do videos for you on how to do all these things, and I'm not, for a couple of reasons, because there are a lot of people out there who would work on magic loop for sure better than I do, because as I said, I don't use it much. I did a Google search of mastering DPNs or knitting with double pointed needles, and there are upwards of 16,000, 28,000 different videos on how to knit with 2 circs or DPNs or magic loop. Somehow I figure you seeing it being done by me is probably, it's all going to be about the same. But I'm here to talk to you about just how you use, why you knit in the round, and how you accomplish what you want to accomplish by knitting in the round. So, and I do a class, when I teach, I do a class on converting flat patterns to knitting in the round, things that you have to take under consideration. So that's for this little, you have to, and you'll see a lot of my patterns will say, this size needle, a US 4, a, what is that, 3.75 millimeter. Let's do a centimeter. 3.75 centimeter. Sorry, I digress. 3 point, whatever it is, a US 4 or whatever size needle in the type of needle that is your preferred method for knitting small circumferences, is what I usually say, which can be magic loop, DPNs, doubles, 2 circs, any type, even those circs that have the bendy stuff in the middle, and not circs, any of the DPN kind of needles that are bendy in the middle, which are kind of cool. Anyway, that's what this is all about. And when we talk about knitting completely in the round, that means that there is no front and back. There are no seams. There is no purling. There are no purls. There is no purling. So you knit completely, in the round. And those of you who are thinking, they'd say, well, how the heck do you handle cardigans? This jacket right here was knit completely in the round. But you're going, well, how do you handle that? And I said, well, that is handled with a steek. And that is the steek is, interestingly enough, the steek is a Gallic, anyway, or I think it's a Gallic word or a Shetland word, but I think it's a Gallic word for to connect. Get that? Isn't that ironic? It's a word that means connect, and it could be the style. You could go over a style or a steek, if you will, to connect 2 fields to the other. It's a way to transfer from one to another. So when you think about steek stitches, I said this in the class the other day, and this, I'm not going to do a whole thing on steeking, but we'll get to, just in this video, we'll get there. If you think about steek stitches as the way to jump over where you would have a hole, a place saver, if it can be used, thought of as for a hole of some sort. In the case of a cardigan, it would be the opening, not a hole, but an opening. It would be the opening up the front there. There are several things. Here is a little demo sweater I'm using for another set of videos, which is all about the Arion coat. If you want to flip over, I've got one of those up right now, and I'm starting to, there are 11 of those. But you can see here, or I think you can see that there is a bit of a thing here. There's 10 steek stitches. I very rarely use the words as a verb, steeking. You cut the steek stitches. You cut the steek or the steek stitches. This is where that would be. That's the front steek, because this is an open cardigan type thing. This particular coat has a split on the sides, so what I call a kick split. There's such a thing as a kick pleat. This is a kick split because it actually is completely open, and you can see where this steek was. This you can see. I always put a purl stitch in there just so that they come out, but that's where the steek was, and that's where it gets cut open. This is what I call the steek flap, and you can see there's the purl and there's the part that was cut, and that will be secured down and folded back here, and a border will come out there for that. I have lots of examples of how steeks are used so you can continue to knit in the round. This is another little child's sweater that is, where are you? This is the front. Okay, this is a pullover, because once you figure out that you've got to cut up the front for a cardigan, then you've got the idea of the armholes. And in this case, this sweater came up, and several stitches were put on a holder, for the underarm here, and you can see they're all right. I don't know if you can see that. They're all on this waist yarn there, and then steek stitches were added, and you can kind of see them right in there, and I'll show you again on this other thing. That's the opening for the arm hole, and that will be cut open, and the sweater will either come out from here, or it will be knitted to the same spot at this underarm, and then it will be worked in the round, including the top of the sleeve. It'll all be worked in one piece. It either can be done as a without the steek. It can be done as a raglan going this way, or it can be done as a set-in sleeve like these up here. These are both set in the round. So that there's no sewing involved in this at all, except for at the very, very top. I think I've talked about that before. Here's another example of a little cardigan. This is my sample piece. You can see nobody's going to wear that sweater, but this is a sweater that had a steek in it, and you can see there the steek. Here are the steek flaps. There's a little flap right there that was cut. It went together. It's inside out. I don't know how I can show it to you once I've got a. How do I do that? Yeah, once I've got it on. But you could. Once I've got the sleeve on. No, I don't know how to do that. Anyway, those are the steek flaps that got cut. They used to be holed together, the back and the front. They got cut open, and then stitches were picked up around the hole that's created. So when you cut this steek open on this one, there's a hole created there, and you pick up stitches and you go out this way. This is another form of knitting completely in the round. This one was done up to the underarm, and then this sleeve was done to that same spot, and then it was all put on one needle and went around and around, working in, doing your decreases all in here in the round. This is done without steeks. This was done with steeks. So it depends on kind of, what you want your look, to be. One of my favorite ways of using steek stitches is with a V-neck, because it's just so much fun. This is a little V-neck sample that was done together with a steek right there. You can see, I've cut it, but you can see the steek there. So when it gets cut, it opens out like this for the V-neck, which is so much fun to do because it's just sitting here looking weird and kind of pokes out, like this. And because you're doing your decreases for your V-neck on the outside of the steek stitches remain the same. And then when you cut it open, it just falls open like that. It's so much fun. I love doing that. So then, let's see, here's a cardigan that, full-size cardigan that had steek stitches, and you can see them right there. That's a steek stitch that was cut open, and then the front ribbing was picked up and worked that way. Of course, the sweater's being worked up and down like this. These stitches are picked up and gone that way. And then once that is done, you can fold that flap that you cut off back and then secure it down with a tapestry needle with some yarn in it, and just to secure it down so it doesn't go anywhere. The sleeve is done the same way. The sleeve stitches are, I know you can see this as well. There is a steek flap right in there that got folded back, and these stitches were picked up and worked out from there. So knitting in the round is, I think it's essential. I mean, I'm always figuring out some ways to knit in the round because it saves on your seams. It decreases the number of purling stitches you have to do. It is easier to read a chart. So there, what is that down there? Sorry, I digress again. It's easier to read a chart and to follow a chart when you've got the right side facing you at all times. So let me double check my notes, make sure I'm not missing anything here. We will talk about the how I have apparently avoided some of the laddering that happens when you change from one needle to the next. If you are doing a magic loop, 2 circs or DPNs, that involves some weaving of the floats or the strands across the back. We'll talk about that when we get to weaving and floats and things. I think that's about it. I'm sorry, this is kind of a short episode, but an important one because knitting in the round is very important. I think that's about it. Yeah, so choose your favorite style. Try them all. There are lots of ways online that different people will show you. As I said, you don't need me to add to the 5-digit numbers of ways of doing knitting in small circumferences or knitting in the round. I would think if you're going to continue to work on stranded color work, you're going to need to perfect one of those ways that you feel comfortable with of knitting small circumferences in the round. So next week we are going to talk about holding yarns, or how I hold yarns. I do two-handed holds, holding yarns and tensioning, and there's several ways you can work on your tension. But until that time, I will be seeing you soon with other videos coming out. I've got a couple of things coming up. But the next one on this discussion, as I said, is the tensioning and holding yarns. So thank you so much for joining. Can I try that again? Thank you so much for joining me, or joining you, whatever. And also that, or steeking you, because you are joining two faces. Sorry. Okay, that's getting silly. I'm so sorry. Anyway, you guys have a great day. I hope to see you soon back here. I hope you are enjoying the series on Stranded Colorwork, which is obviously one of my very favorites. So, thank you guys. You can reach me at all the usual places. Bye-bye.